Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco,
Sean,
are you like me, always learning?
always learning? Oh yes, absolutely. You know, I have a problem like even just watching or listening to things that is just for pure entertainment. I always feel like I need to learn something. It's kind of sick, I think. I don't know. Something is wrong with me.
So the reality TV shows, you don't like to learn how other people live?
No,
That's not your
I
cup
have
of tea?
zero interest in those kind of things. Sorry.
Well, thankfully, we share that desire to be students in life, constantly learning, and you can either kind of go with it and learn as you go and hope things turn out all right, or you can take a more proactive approach and actually think about it a bit and read about it and listen to podcasts about it. And thankfully, we know somebody who we adore and is super smart and is passionate about leadership and helping others become leaders in his leadership student. It's not just a podcast. So the podcast is coming soon, which we're going to talk about, but it's a whole series of things that our guest and new host on ITSP Magazine Network, MK Palmer, is going to be bringing to bear. He's already doing some of it. MK, how are you? It's good to see you.
I'm good. Great to see you both, Sean and Marco. Appreciate the accolades on the tee up and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah,
Well, we were very excited when you told us that you had an idea to do the podcast, and I'm like, great.
yes.
I always love the way that you speak, that you motivate people, that you tell stories. So this is all about telling story and teaching and listening and learning. So welcome. Honestly.
Thank you. I'm excited about it. And as we've had discussions, I'm already teeing up content, as it were. So I've got some episodes already in the bag and just really enjoying the conversations I'm having so far.
Nice. And before we get into that, you've been on the show before. If people are out and about, they've probably crossed paths with you at a conference somewhere. You and I have had the opportunity to do some work together at Pepperdine Graziadio School of Business with the cyber risk program and some of the cyber programs they have there. But I'm not everybody. Not everybody knows you. So a few words about who MK is, and maybe look into the journey that brought you to this point, because I know you've been involved in a lot of things, my friend, a lot of cool things. So maybe share a few of those highlights.
Appreciate that. So the short, as we call it at Google, the TLDR on me is I'm a longtime security practitioner. I'm currently a senior leader at Google Cloud, senior cybersecurity leader. I've been at Google now almost 2 years. Came into the private sector following an extensive career in the U.S. government. 32 years in the U.S. government, where I had opportunity, obviously, as a United States Marine with Department of Defense, and then an extensive career of 22 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, 22 years as a special agent in the FBI, allowed me the opportunity late in my career with the Bureau to transition into cybersecurity. And I got what might be considered a world-class lesson up close and personal on cybersecurity issues, the cyber threat landscape, and investigating cyber crimes as a senior leader in the Bureau. And then got on the speaking circuit. So I do quite a bit of speaking as it relates to cybersecurity and the topic of leadership. And we're going to get to that, I think, here in a bit. And then, retired from government service after 32 years and went to work for a company called Palo Alto Networks for a few years as a field CISO. And really got my feet underneath me, got my sea legs, as it were, in the private sector, and that catapulted me into my current position at Google Cloud. So Long time government employee, now successfully operating in the private sector. And I've been in the leadership practice and realm for the entirety of my professional career and then some. So this is definitely a passion topic for me. Appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk to you guys about it.
Yeah, and it's obvious the passion, and I've seen you speak, and I've seen some of your posts on LinkedIn that you've already put out, and insightful, inspiring, and I don't say very welcoming. I mean, very approachable in how you put things together. And so, what prompted you to? Well, let's take a step back. So the podcast kind of is a result of the work you're already doing with the leadership student. Maybe talk to us about the bigger picture first, and then how the podcast comes into play with that.
So I hate to do this to you guys, but I got to take you all the way back to my youth.
Back to when I was hatched.
Yeah, way back when. When I was a little guy growing up in Washington D.C., my dad, who I consider to be a leadership student, certainly a student of the discipline, expressed to me in very early in my childhood about the concept of leadership, and he explained it to me in the context of football. I was a huge, and still am a huge NFL fan, and I was, kind of caught the NFL bug pretty early in life. And I'll never forget. He asked me one day. I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. He asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be a running back in the NFL." His response to me was, "Why be a running back when you can be the quarterback, who's the leader of the team?" And that started a series of conversations he then had with me as I was growing up around what it means to lead, what it means to be the person who is driving the momentum, bringing force to an issue or problem, and then getting people together to solve a problem. And that conversation literally stuck with me from that day until present. And I've gone through essentially a lifetime of being a student of this discipline, thinking about, and of course I've grown maturity-wise as a leader over the years. Certainly my time in the military is a reflection of my desire to develop my skills as a leader. Probably no better place to sort of earn your stripes or practice the discipline of leadership than the military. But I've had some pretty unique experiences both in the private sector and public sector. And it remains as a passion topic for me because it's something that, because it involves people, means it's challenging, right? There's no one textbook that you can read. It's an amalgamation of reading, experience, and your exposure to different types of leaders, your experience as a leader that ultimately results in positioning you wherever you happen to be in terms of your career. And I certainly feel that way. And it gives me the idea that we're all on this continual journey around developing as leaders. And that's where the idea of being sort of the eternal student, or as I call it, the leadership student, that's where the idea evolved from. And I got to the point in my career where I want to get back to that passion, and I want to share with others the stories that I have and the experiences that I have. But I also want to extend that because, I'm just one person in this huge maze of ours. And there are so many other fantastic stories of folks who just have these great experiences in leadership. And if we can tease out in these conversations some of their backgrounds and give folks some nuggets, I think they can get some real good takeaways, and it'll help them develop ultimately.
Well, I think so, because as you're going through this eternal student and the joke that Sean and I made at the beginning, I feel like there is a ton of books out there on leadership. I had a few guests on my own show. I talked to, astronauts that have been commander in space, and they are amazing leaders coming from the military, of course. So I always wonder, is there really like the formula for being the perfect leader? Or there are many different situations where you adopt your leadership to be the good leadership for the job?
Yeah. So that the short answer to that is yes, right? All of the above. That's a great question, and I think that it's one of the things that we grapple with on the podcast series. I put that in the same lane as the question that I intend to ask every guest on the show, and that is whether or not leaders are born or made. Where do you come out on that, and what do you think really are the ingredients that make an exceptional leader? And I think that I'm not going to share all of the results, but I think that what you'll find is that most folks believe that it's a combination of things that really, it's like ingredients, some of which you can't really identify, because I believe part of it has to do with some aspects of what you're born with, but then what you're born with in terms of characteristics has to have a certain experience in order to enrich those characteristics, develop them, and then position you. You have to be in a position then to exercise, learn from those experiences, and then carry on and develop yourself as a leader. So it's a combination of all of those things. I don't think there's a single book that you can read, but certainly you can. I'm a big proponent of reading about other folks' leadership journeys, because even if the entire journey doesn't resonate with me, there will be certain aspects of their story that will. So I think the short answer is that certain aspects of leadership can be taught. I think it's important. Certainly the military, I think, as an entity, believes that it can be taught. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a whole system where they bring in folks at certain ages as officers and expect for them to lead others nearly immediately after a certain amount of training. They have the same expectations of enlisted personnel at certain levels of their matriculation. So there's a lot that goes into it. Reading, exposing yourself to, even if it's just, thought leadership talks, speeches, and then the real thing that really helps people develop as leaders is that direct experience. If you haven't spent time actually being responsible for the outcomes of others, then it's hard for people to really get what the leadership challenge is about. And part of the thing that I was hoping to distill or uncover in the newsletter on LinkedIn was that I see a lot of great quotes about leadership out there from folks who I'm not sure have actually done any leadership or actually been in the breach, as you might say, leading people. And while some of those quotes are great, again, I want to tease out stories around people who have actually kind of been there, done that, walk the talk, so to speak, on the subject.
Yeah, and I guess to both your points, Marco's question and your response, it's and Marco does this quite a bit, using the concept of ingredients, right? Just because you have ingredients doesn't mean you can make something tasty.
Absolutely.
And to your point, and to your point, because you made something tasty doesn't mean you can make it again the same way. And you may not always have access to the right ingredients, or you might mix up the process or something, which is another part of the process, right? And so talk to me a bit about the format of your show. Clearly you have experience and you're bringing your own thoughts. You have guests that are bringing their own. Are you using resources as well to kind of help round things out? And how much, kind of to this concept of ingredients, how much of what you do in your show is presenting the story versus helping the listeners hear the story and apply it to their own experience?
Yeah, I'm hoping in the context of the show to bring in great people with great experiences, and through my skills as an interviewer, since I spent a career in the FBI interviewing people, get to something that's super interesting. And it may start off superficial, just sort of opening the door to the conversation. But believe me, inevitably in their responses, I will identify something that I think is a key piece of the marsala of leadership, this combination of things. And those are the things that we then double click on and tease out in the context of a conversation. So it's a one-on-one interview with me. There's actually very little of, I try as much I can to step back on my personal background, because folks can get that from my talks and my leadership writings and musings and that kind of thing. I'm really interested in hearing other people's stories around leadership, because I feel like a bit of a eternal monk, if you will, in the leadership discipline and practice. And I want to hear selfishly for myself, because I get stuff from these stories as well. And I figure if I'm learning from them, someone else who's listening has to be learning as well.
And how wide and how much variety? Now I feel like I want to talk about food. How many different ingredients and
Yeah.
exotic food are you bringing on? Meaning, are you gonna talk with people from different vertical industries? How far are you gonna go? Because you can be a leader just teaching kids, right?
You can be a leader in a lot of different functions. And that's a great question. And I'm trying as best I can to identify leaders across a variety of business verticals, trying not to over index on the type of leader that I am, because there's an inclination to quickly identify folks whose careers and backgrounds resonate for me, people who come from military backgrounds or careers in public service and that kind of thing. While I want to include those stories, I do want to try and get as wide a swath as I possibly can, because you hit the nail on the head. You can be leaders in so many different aspects of life, and that's something that I intend to tackle as well. This idea of straightforward leading isn't always the case. There's coaching, which is a different aspect of leading, where you are leading groups continuously in terms of team evolution and/or development and execution. There's this idea of being an advisor, which I feel like I'm at this point in my career, where I have a good stable of folks that both I reach out to and who reach out to me for continuous advice and conversation, really around career moves and career trajectory and progression. And so we evolve, I think, continuously throughout our careers in these different levels of leadership. And I'm trying to really get away from the typical hierarchical belief that, just because you're put in charge of a bunch of people, that automatically makes you a leader. It certainly puts you in a leadership position. Whether or not you execute well on it is another thing. But then there's other opportunities to lead, to include, by the way, as one of the great leadership authors wrote, including when you're not leading anyone. In other words, when you're just in charge of yourself, something Maxwell called the 360-degree leader. So the Marines, I think, have evangelized this concept for a while, which is this idea of lead from wherever you stand. No matter where you happen to be in the organization, you can be a leader, whether you have people working with or for you or not. And this idea has been amplified over time, and I'm a big believer in that. Certainly coming into the private sector, where my first role was as an individual contributor. I had never heard of that before. I didn't know what that was until I got assigned that role at Palo Alto Networks. And I was still able to step into the room and act as a leader, even if in the small touches with account teams, providing advice around how to approach a particular customer, what maybe needed to be involved in the engagement with the customer, that kind of thing. So there's opportunities to lead in lots of different places, and it doesn't always have the title leader or an official designation.
Yeah, sometimes maybe you're just somebody to inspire. I mean, I think inspiring comes together with the word leadership many times, right? Like, can you inspire, can you inspire just one person or many? Are you still a leader if you inspire just one person? In my opinion, yes, you're giving a good example, and it's not a matter of quantity, but quality, right?
Right. Yeah, especially if in your position as a leader, you inspire one person who happens to knock a project out of the park, and gets the whole team the kind of awareness and spotlight attention that the team deserves. I mean, all it takes when you're in an official role as a leader, you have to be cognizant that you're influencing folks, no matter whether you're expecting to influence them or not. And the same should be said, for those of us who have risen at this point in our careers to a point where we are in a position to influence folks. I get people that reach out to me all the time who had maybe one conversation or heard me talk at a function, and there was some nugget they got out of it and took away, and then changed their personal trajectory. And they went off and did something great because they said, you said X, Y, and Z, that people are capable of jumping into the cybersecurity industry, and all they needed to do was, study, go get a cert, make some networking connections. I did all of that and was successful. That's a form of leadership.
And speaking of the different forms, clearly we have history in cybersecurity, and Google Cloud is a technology that serves many businesses. tell me about the leadership role you're going to be talking about. Is it I know we purposely said this is not cybersecurity. This is leadership across the board.
Right.
But is it also, or is it around business leadership, or do you touch on other personal aspects of leadership? You said leading yourself, right? That may or may
Yeah,
not be.
I mean, I think there's probably going to be a bit of an over-indexing on business leadership because I am absolutely fascinated as now a senior leader in business. I'm fascinated by what passes for leadership in business sometimes, and I'm not talking about direct experiences necessarily, but I think oftentimes, and this is one of the challenges actually, which is, I think is an interesting question in our industry from a technology standpoint. Do we conflate technology expertise with leadership nowadays? I think we do. And I would love to debate or have a conversation with anyone about that. I think what we see in the technology industry is we assume that because someone has an immense amount of technical knowledge, that makes them a good leader. And that's a fallacy. Can someone with technical expertise be a good leader? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean because they do have technical expertise that they are a great leader. And you should expect in those instances where we have, folks with deep technical expertise leading, that they still need some of that nurturing and some of those components of what it means to be a good leader. And certain companies certainly recognize that. I can tell you, personally, at Google as a senior leader, they understand that you come in as a senior quote unquote leader. There's an expectation that you also think about the discipline of leadership in a different way. And they make sure you go through executive level courses and get some exposure to what's called the Google Leadership School, which I think is a great thing because you got to recognize the importance and impact that this particular discipline has. And when you don't recognize it, or you don't take the time to pay attention, that you're maybe putting people into roles that require them to think and approach team leadership in a particular way. If you don't take time to nurture that, then you could set yourself up for some team failures. And then you're always, left to wonder why teams aren't executing at a very high level when you get this great technical leader in place. And that's because maybe there's not enough of an emphasis on the discipline of leadership there.
I love that. And I couldn't agree based on my own experience, either doing sports, you say, you grow up doing sports or music, anything really. Just because you're so good at something, it doesn't automatically make you somebody that is able to teach or lead. Like how many good player cannot be good coach?
That's the perfect analogy, right? It's this idea that just because you in baseball happen to be a 350 hitter or a 400 hitter doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager in baseball. In basketball, some of the greatest players in history have taken a run at coaching and failed miserably at it because they couldn't instill in the players the same kind of drive that they had that made them these phenomenal players. Leadership takes a lot of self-reflection, and it takes humility, I think, to understand that something different is being asked of you when you're put in a leadership position. And if you don't have that ability to self-reflect, if you don't have that level of humility, there can be some fantastic failures that you experience.
Yeah. Even if there is a tremendous success to look back on, that may have come at huge expense. You may have driven the team mad in the process, or burned them all out, or destroyed the car in the F1 race, right? But you won. You won that one, but you no longer have a car. You have to spend another gazillion dollars to build another one.
And let's be clear, leadership's one of those disciplines that, quite frankly, you learn an immense amount from failure. You learn more from your failures than you do the successes. The difference is, are you able to then take the learnings from that failure and then turn it around so that you don't experience them with any kind of repeatability in the future?
One more question for me. Do you think that the style of leadership has changed in the latest year? When I think about leadership years ago, I would think more about authority, kind of like that. Now, when I think about a good leader, I think about empathy.
You nailed it. You cut right to the chase there. I have not always been someone who's cognizant about the subject of empathy or the fact that that needs to be a characteristic of leaders. I will tell you that, the hierarchical leadership type background that I came from, empathy wasn't a big area of focus. I have come to believe in my own evolution that empathy may, among the characteristics, it's an MVP. It's pretty high and close to the top. And yes, I believe leadership has definitely changed in the way that it's practiced over time. And there's lots of different reasons for that. But I certainly believe that the most effective leaders today are ones who can show that they understand that the people that they're leading and the teams that they're leading have lives, business, and things outside of the realm of their day-to-day work. And if you're not taking those things into account in your practice of leadership to account for allowing folks to show up as their whole selves, you're not getting the kind of high performance that you may be capable of getting out of people. When folks recognize that you have an interest in their personal outcomes, they actually perform better for you. And a lot of people still miss the boat on that.
Yeah, I can look back to an executive that I worked with who was very charismatic and created a belief amongst the organization. So they believed in him. They believed in what he was guiding them toward. And that belief system really kind of pulled everybody along with him. And it was pretty incredible to watch. I believe, MK, that you're going to have some really cool conversations. So tell us. I know you have some already in the works, and then you have a special Broadcast Alley panel that you've pulled together at RSA conference. Can you tease us a little bit about what's coming up?
So I've got a couple episodes in the bag already, and what I'm finding is that I've had already a variety of that direct leader conversation. So folks that kind of come up in the system very similar to the one that I came up in, and have some very codified beliefs and an approach to leadership that for this person has been absolutely effective. And actually, you get a lot of energy out of hearing them talk about how they approach it, and they're able to kind of rattle off the principles that guide their leadership, all the way to folks who are professional coaches in this realm. I had a fantastic conversation that will come out with a leadership coach. I don't think that, maybe a decade ago that this idea of leadership coaching really had caught steam. Folks constantly believe, is this a racket? Is it real that you can actually be a coach to someone and really help them evolve and then teach their leadership? I believe you can. I have a great conversation with a leadership coach who's got some extensive experience in the industry in that regard. And I think that kind of variety, again, across a variety of business verticals, is what folks can expect to hear in these conversations. And they're, I get lost in the conversations already. I think time-wise, we're hitting like 40 and 45 minutes per convo. And I think I had originally thought it might be a little shorter than that. But I get lost in the combos because they're good conversations. And I hope that folks will listen, turn them on when they're commuting outside of their remote work and home offices. And, at some point in time during the day, just to get those nuggets out of them. So the conversations have been good, and I'm excited about all the ones to come.
Yeah. And I think when you have the passion for it, like you do, and I can tell you from my own show, when I'm really into it, I forget about what's going on. I'm just thinking about what am I interested, what questions am I having, what am I thinking about? Thank you, guests for getting me to think. And speaking of thinking, the RSA conference is coming up. The theme is Better Together, and you have a group of people you've brought together to do a show from the floor in the Broadcast Alley. It's called Identifying, Developing, and Nurturing Diverse Leaders in Cybersecurity. And I know you're part of a group, CyberSecurity, and I think you have a few folks joining you from that. And maybe tell us a little bit about that session. What do you expect to do?
So, CyberSecurity, it's a nonprofit that's been around since 2014. I recently was asked to take on a position as the vice president of the organization, which means I'll be matriculating as the president at the end of the year and taking on a 3-year term. I'm fascinated by this topic of the lack of diversity in the cybersecurity industry. And I'm fascinated because an industry desperately needs people because the pipeline shortage, if you look at any one particular consensus figure, somewhere around 750,000 open positions here in the United States annually. We are more than a decade behind filling this gap of people. And there is a demographic of people out there, women, people of color, veterans, others who could help us shorten that gap. And all they need is a little bit of outreach. Sometimes they need a helping hand. Sometimes they need access to training materials and things that might position them well to just break into the industry. And all these folks are willing to do the work. They just need exposure to the opportunity. And that's what CyberSecurity is about. And so I've asked the current chairman of the board, Julian Waits, the current president, Larry Whiteside Jr., two names that are likely familiar, certainly to the security folks listening to this podcast, and then Sharon Burgess, who's the current vice chairman of the board. And Sharon's currently sitting CISO for a large global organization. It really just, these folks are heavyweights in the field. They're all executive leaders for CyberSecurity. And so I'm going to take a step back as the vice president of the organization, a member of the board, and just interview them about why this is a passion topic for them as well, and what their experience has been developing leaders, people of color and women in our industry. And I think it'll be a very unique conversation. This is another one of those things where I think I'll probably get lost in the conversation because their answers will inevitably push me into different lanes, different areas of questioning. And because they have such deep experience, I think the conversation is going to be phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to it.
And I mean, Marco and I have the honor to be there with you, watching these be recorded. So I'm excited to actually witness it in person. And for those listening to this, you can too. So it's Moscone West. And let me get the time right. So it's Wednesday, the 26th at 10 local time, Pacific time. And come by, see the crew, hear the conversation. Of course, we'll publish it on YouTube and our podcast players as well. But if you want to meet some leaders, stop by the broadcast alley that day. It'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, stop by and say hello.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great guest. I happen to know 2 out of 3, so I'm sure the third is fantastic as well. And yes, as Sean reminded, all that content will come on ITSP Magazine, will be in podcast format, it will be on video, and very soon your show will be available as well. And I usually ask this question, which is like, who you envision the audience to be, but I'm gonna answer for you. I think the answer is everybody, because
Absolutely.
either,
there you go.
right? Did I nail that? Okay, good.
You nailed it.
I mean, either you want to judge who is your leader, is it doing the right thing? That could be an idea. Or maybe you'll get inspired to be like, hey, I could be a leader too. And so either you're young, you're older, you're a more mature role in the industry, any industry really, or even if you're coaching a team of kids playing soccer or football or whatever it is. I'm looking forward to listen to this. So again, absolutely. Sean, we got lucky again to have another amazing host join the ITSP Magazine podcast network family, and we're really looking forward to this. And when we publish this, will probably be either you already published your first episode or very close to it. And again, I'm excited. I invite everybody to participate, comment, because that's important too. Two-way communication.
Right.
I think it's part of leadership as well, but I don't want to keep talking about it.
Subscribe to MK's newsletter on LinkedIn for this, for leadership student. Very good to catch all the stuff that he puts out, including the podcast.
Yeah, I
Yep.
appreciate the support, guys. I'm looking forward to formally stepping into my role as part of the ITSP Magazine family of podcasters, and just looking forward to the experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, MK.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.